Trina, I actually wanted to ask you a question. You're a historian chronicling women in comics, and I know that in a lot of ways, in the same way that gay rights movement came out of feminism, and it would have been possible without feminism. I think gay comics wouldn't have been possible without some of the women's comics that came before it. So I know that there's a history with your Sandy Comes Out story, and then with Mary's kind of response to that and creating a lesbian comic. So I was wondering if you guys could talk about the interaction then, the beginning of women's comics and gay comics.
Sure, great. Sandy, you want to start? I mean, you're not Sandy, you're Mary. Mary, you want to start?
Sandy's fictional. Yeah.
No, Sandy was my roommate.
Oh,
yes.
Mary.
Is this on? Well, it's funny because I was so outraged when I read Trina's comic. I never thought, first of all, I never heard the word lesbian until I was 19. So you have to remember, by the time you all were really doing gay comics, there was already a community. So I was just starting to find my community. And there was Trina's comic, which represented, it was so sort of blasé, and I was deep into lesbian Stalinism. How dare she take it all so lightly? Oh my gosh, so I sat down with a rapidograph pen on my sofa and quickly penned this thing. And mind you, I don't draw very well. So there as a response, and it was really, it wasn't for money, it wasn't for a community. I just had to sort of get it out there as, I guess, sort of our point of view, which of course feels very different now. Then we met each other, became really good friends, and here we are.
And I didn't know at the time, because Mary did visit me after Come Out Comics was the first one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, after Come Out Comics came out, she visited me with the comic. I had already seen it. And it is true that she was not a very good cartoonist. She actually improved. She's really a good artist now. But it wasn't very good, but I was very supportive, wasn't I? I was very supportive.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
I actually wanted to, the public face of gay comics is, of course, the covers. I just wanted to kind of, I had been talking to Robert about this before, about how kind of creation of the covers. And Vaughn, you did a cover, I think it was number 4.
Yes.
Yeah. How was creating the cover different than, thanks, Robert. How was doing the cover different from doing interior stories, working in color, and also just the kind of concept that this is a public face that you're presenting of the comic book.
Well, the cover was kind of a collaborative effort with Howard. I sent him a whole bunch of sketches, and he picked one he thought that would be appropriate. And then I did actually 2 or 3 versions of that before he was happy with it. And it was a learning process.
Yeah.
So I did a sketch for where I wanted the color to go, and somebody else ended up doing the overlays, because before computer technology, we actually had to do these overlay sheets where we would cut out the individual color on strips. So now you just press a button and dinosaur technology.
I used to be blind after doing those cover overlays.
But also, I mean, where I was coming from, because I wasn't coming from a professional comics background or a newspaper cartoonist. I was in the opposition that I'd grown up reading underground cartoonists.
Right.
I mean, when I was in high school was when the first Zap comics and Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers were out. And from that I went into doing editorial cartoons for smaller gay newspapers in the day. So I had experience with working with editors, doing overlays and all of that.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of us in gay comics weren't really professionally polished, because we came at it from a different background.
That's actually one thing I think that's really striking about gay comics, and I think people tend to think back on the series and think of it for its social value, and it was quite amazing, this kind of cultural, historical value. But there's this tremendous diversity of styles. I mean, it's a really amazing anthology in that way, and it seems that that's because people are coming from all different angles. Kind of professional artists, little underground cartoonists. And everything in between. I was wondering if some of you could talk about where you were coming from. Lee, I know that you were kind of a professional animator, and I mean, you had worked in a number of different media before comics. Was gay comics kind of part of that your artistic journey in some way, or?
Well, I did all kinds of stories. But practically, if anybody contacted me and said, "Would you like to do a story?" for whatever their title would be, I'm there. So It was because I had so many different kinds of stories to tell, and Gay Comics was a great place to tell certain kinds of stories.
Yeah. Robert, as an editor, was it a difficulty finding, like, were you trying to look for some kind of aesthetic cohesion with the series, or was that exciting for you, this diversity of styles and?
I like diversity. I always liked the underground because there was oftentimes crudely drawn stories that had crude art that had great stories, and that worked for me. I always wanted to take a chance on newcomers, and on almost every issue there was somebody whose work may not be that professional looking, but there was always something that intrigued me. And if it intrigued me, and I got very jaded very quickly about gay stories. And I have to disagree. I thought Vaughn and Burton especially were two of the best craftsmen I'd ever seen in gay comics. Their artwork is mind-boggling. Whereas some of the others, it's like pouring the ink onto the page and shoving it around with their hands in comparison.
That's a valuable style.
Expressionist, yeah, exactly.
I just want to say that if you look at any of my work, you can see that I was very heavily influenced by Leonard Starr, who drew Mary Perkins on stage for about 22 years. It was syndicated by the Chicago Tribune, and it ran from 1957 to 1979. And I thought his artwork and stories were absolutely out of this world. And I actually, when I went away to school, they didn't have it in the local newspaper, so my grandmother would actually cut it out and send it to me in like 2-week installments. I still have that, you know, but I was very heavily influenced in my own style by the way he used composition, because it was like watching a little movie. I mean, it's like you're watching like cinematography, the way he composes the frames. He's also a terrific writer. I'm not such a great writer, but I really I can put together a visual, you know, but I really like his stuff.
Mary, you said that you, I mean, for you, it was about this kind of concept in the story, and that was what was the driving force. I mean, but you also kind of then progressed as an artist. Or...
Well, actually, the overwhelming talent that it takes to draw comic books was just too much of a challenge for me. So I was so interested in the story that I ended up writing novels, and I wrote 6 of them, and that was really great. They were very sort of visual, and then I was not burdened with drawing at all. But really, the motivation has never been for money. It's always just been that there has to be our story that is told. So, for example, when my parents were very ill, and I had to fly transatlantic a lot, and what did you get? A lot of mystery novels with men who have a great time and party and fuck and have great adventures. And I thought, I want a lesbian who has parties and fucks and has great adventures. So I wrote them really to fill that void. I mean, there wasn't any lightweight. You had to read Sappho as a right-on woman or something on the way back. So it was really a void, and I feel very strongly that way. I've never written for money. I've just done it because it needs to be there. So people ask me when's the next book, and I don't know what it is, although I have an idea for a graphic novel called, and well, I want to do it sort of like the 20s, where there's one of those, like the Bobbsey twins, where one page is just an illustration, and the rest is text, so I don't have to draw so much. And it's called I Paid for Sex. Hasn't been written yet, has it?
I want to say that we are big fans. I'm a huge fan of Mary's mysteries. They are fabulous. I recommend to everyone. Mary, are they still in print, or are people going to have a hard time finding them?
Oh, you can find them on Amazon.com for
Good.
50 cents.
Oh, great, great.
Oh, yeah.
What deal? I have all of them. They're fabulous.